So today we have a special presenter. He has been with us from the beginning, 3 years ago, and almost 3 years ago. Here we are, coming up here in August. Very grateful to be able to pick this man's brain. This is his degree, so I mean he's had a lot of time to really just double down when it comes to this aspect of the test. And I'm grateful for his passion towards the topic. So next slide, Nate. Let's
All right. Well, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you guys. I'm Nathan. Just like Travis said, I have a bachelor's in political science, and I'm also an aspiring future diplomat. We like to say we're future diplomats here. Not we want to be. No, we are. It's just we're going to be. And yeah, so he invited me to speak today, and so I'll be happy to. Yeah, let's go through some of these first few slides before we get into the meat and bones of it.
And I'll officially hand it off to you after the announcements.
Okay.
Today, we're kicking off a two-part series, and we will be studying the key United States domestic policy areas. So we're going to go into the New Deal, the Great Depression, the Great Society, the War on Poverty, I can't remember the other slides, but I'll just read what's up here. Domestic policies, foreign, and how they shape foreign policy priorities, and we will look at major legislative acts and the historical context. We'll also look at the Great Society as well. So today's focus will be the New Deal, and in its response to the Great Depression, and also we will go into the Civil Rights era, and also what's the next part, Nate?
It's the New Deal, and then I don't remember how I organized it. If we have time, because I'll get more to it when it's my time to get into it, but we'll see how much time. But it's the New Deal, and then it's the Fair Deal.
The Fair Deal. It's a lot to unpack, so I'm grateful Nate is going to be sharing his knowledge today. Next slide. And as you are aware, October did not have a test, but I feel like I just misinterpreted what the announcement was on Pearson. It said that there would be a freeze up until October. I just saw that freeze was hiring only, not testing. So we're going to be getting ready for February. So February 2026, the testing windows are January 31st through February 7th. The registration opens this year, December 15th. And as shared before, instead of it being 3 times the amount of competition, it will be 4 times now the amount of competition to get your date scheduled for the FSOT. Those virtual seats, no matter if you are taking them at your home or in a testing site, even they have limited seating as well. So in those testing sites, they are testing for a lot of other tests and different types of tests. So definitely be prepared, have your personal narratives ready. Them giving us another quarter of the year is a blessing in disguise. So definitely take it to your advantage. And I'm going to leave the rest to Nate.
All right. Well, yeah, Travis put that up there. I wouldn't have put my own face up on a slide like that, just so you know. I am Nathan Garcia. I have a degree in political science. And so today we're going to be doing a 2-part series, possibly more, just because there is so much content to cover. But the main idea is domestic policies that has come from the United States since the Great Depression up to today. With those being the New Deal, the Great Society, Reaganomics, the Reagan Era, and modern reform debates. So for today, our goals are to understand the 4 major U.S. domestic policy areas. Like I said, we might do 1, maybe 2. And we're going to grasp how internal policy affects global diplomacy. We're going to learn some of the vocabulary and the context that specifically you could see on the FSOT and the FSOA. And we're going to be prepared to answer some tough policy questions abroad. So now, with all that being said, this is a study group. I'm by no means an expert, so please feel free to come off of mute, type something in the chat, send emojis, whatever. If you see something in my teeth, post that one emoji, let me know. Here, we're just all feeding off of each other's knowledge, so it's not just a lecture. Now then, so today we'll be talking about key U.S. domestic policy eras since the Great Depression to the Great Society and beyond. Like I was saying earlier, it's such a dense topic that an entire semester's worth of classes could be just about one part of what we're talking about today. And to be honest, that's kind of how it is with most of the topics we have to study for the Foreign Service. Who here has seen that suggested reading list on the state.gov website for the FSOT? Right? So then you'll know that it's like a 6-page or something list of books that would take like decades to read, right? It's overwhelming. But with that being said, the idea is to just kind of be generally informed so that we're well-rounded diplomats. So that when a topic does come up, such as U.S. domestic policies, we're not just deer in headlights, right? And so for today, we're going to just, the idea is after today, let's come away knowing like, oh, what's the New Deal? I know what that means. And, just some key topics, key terms, kind of just a general idea so that we understand why it matters and more importantly, why it matters to us as diplomats. Let me skip through some of these real quick. Speaking of why it matters to us as diplomats, let's get into it. First of all, why does it matter for the Foreign Service? If anybody wants to throw in an answer or type something in the chat, why do we today need to know about past U.S. domestic policy eras?
I think history. Sorry, I should have raised my hand.
You're all good. Anybody just come on.
I think history teaches us a lot about what's happening in current events. I know that this administration has taught me new things that at least the last 4 administrations did not get a chance to show me, and different terms, different tools when it comes to diplomacy and conducting business with other countries. So I noticed that what happens in the first 100 days of a presidency seat, it's kind of their monument. Isn't how they're really just making a stance. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. So in every embassy in the world, people aren't just watching what America does abroad. They're paying attention to what we're doing at home. They're tracking our elections, our healthcare debates, social movements, our economy, all of these things. And they're asking, is America living up to its values? Is America stable? Is it credible? And so when we take our oaths as Foreign Service officers, we're not just representing our flag, we're representing our whole domestic story. And so we're going to get questions. In Brazil, somebody might ask us, why does the U.S. invest billions in defense while there's homelessness rising? In Kenya, we might be asked about race and policing in America. And so in order to be able to answer these complex questions, we're going to need to understand the history, just like Travis said. And so that's why today we're walking through those certain eras of the history of what America's domestic policies have been and that currently shape the way we live today and how we're seen abroad. And so let's get to it. Yeah.
So if anyone raises their hand, I will see it. Nate, he has the slides in front of him and his teaching content. So if anyone raises their hand, I will support and make sure that you can get attention to your question or statement. I do also have a statement to make. I was in Oslo, Sweden last October, and I was speaking to just different people on the train, and someone asked me, they are a nursing student, and they asked me so much about the election and what we thought, what was going to happen. And they were, I guess, nervous about their career and about their local economy. I was genuinely curious. Well, you're here. why are you so concerned about what I'm concerned about what we have going on, but why are you so concerned? So it was amazing that, I mean, and I hate to even sound, like, well, why are you? But I was genuinely curious, and I was grateful to have that healthy conversation, which, yeah, that I'm glad we had. So
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I love that. And yes, if I miss something, thank you, Travis, for being able to just interrupt me or anybody. Absolutely. Now, I love timelines. Being able to see a topic structured on a timeline of events, it just tickles my brain in a way that just helps me to understand context and everything better. So, as we're going to go through each era, we're going to look at the timeline of how it all played out. And we are starting with the New Deal from 1933 to 1939. Now, let's set the scene. Actually, before I set the scene, let me ask a question. What was kind of the big event going on in the US in the 1930s?
all right, we have Jasmine.
Okay,
Great Depression.
exactly. The Great Depression. So now,
Matthew, was that your answer as well? Do you have another event?
No, that was my answer.
Okay.
yeah, yeah, and that's absolutely right. The Great Depression. So let's set the scene a bit. 1933, it's the fourth year of the Great Depression. Banks are closing, farmers are losing land they've owned for generations. The GDP has collapsed by nearly a third. Industrial production cut in half. 1 in 4 Americans are unemployed. And globally, the world is watching. They're wondering if democracy itself can survive such a blow. Specifically, democracy, because in Europe, authoritarian leaders are rising. Mussolini in Italy, Hitler in Germany, Stalin in the Soviet Union, and they all promise order and prosperity through centralized control. And so there's kind of the context going into 1933, setting up the stage for the New Deal. So where does the New Deal come from? Franklin Roosevelt enters the presidency in March 1933 with a promise: a New Deal for the American people. It's meant to be a massive, coordinated government response that rescues the economy, restores confidence, and it reforms the system so that something like this never happens again. And compared to other nations who are consolidating all their power into a single ruler, the New Deal is sort of doubling down on democratic processes, laws passed by Congress, programs run openly, and accountability to voters. Now, there's some of that. The Great Depression, GDP drops by 30%, quarter people unemployed. Now, the 3 R's. So, when FDR brought about the New Deal, he had 3 main goals behind it: relief, recovery, and reform. First, relief. Immediate action to keep people alive and working. Simple as that. And one of the best known examples of a program like that was the Civilian Conservation Corps, also known as the CCC. It hired young men, often from struggling rural families, to plant over 3 billion trees, build park facilities, and fight soil erosion. The Federal Emergency Relief Administration, FERA, provided direct cash payments to the unemployed and funded local public works. The thing is, relief programs weren't just charity, they were designed to restore dignity by putting people back to work. Do we have any questions about relief or just the whole idea of this being a part of the New Deal's goals? Because next came recovery. This was about jump-starting the economy. So if relief is just about keeping people alive and working, recovery is about jump-starting the economy. The Works Progress Administration, the WPA, became the largest employer in the nation. They built over 650,000 miles of roads, more than 120,000 public buildings, thousands of bridges, and even airports. The Tennessee Valley Authority, the TVA, electrified one of the poorest regions in the country, bringing not just power, but flood controls, jobs, and modernization to 7 different states. Recovery programs weren't just about building things, they were about proving to the American public and the world that a democracy could still mobilize their resources, even on a massive scale. Any questions about recovery? Pretty straightforward, stimulate the economy, right? Good. Because next we got reform. This was about making changes to the system so that we wouldn't have another collapse like the Great Depression. Social Security Act, 1935. It created a pension for the elderly, unemployment insurance, and aid for the disabled. The Glass-Steagall Act, it put a wall between commercial banking and investment banking. It reduced risk speculation. And the Securities and Exchange Commission, also known as the SEC, began regulating the stock market. These reforms told the American people, look, your savings are safe, your retirement is secure, and your government is looking out for long-term stability. So, relief, recovery, reform. Do we all kind of have a basic idea of understanding that of what the whole idea is behind them?
Small statement. I think President Trump just initiated something similar, but it's for stock options for children born after this year or starting this year. I forgot which one, but it's a stock, and I guess it's a general $1,000 deposit that is I don't know who manages it, but someone is managing it, and you will get a balance or something in the mail, a statement in the mail. Yeah, I just saw that maybe about a month ago.
I haven't heard of that. That's interesting. That you know what, that brings up a good point, that even today our leaders are looking at things we did in the past to inform decisions we're making now. I mean, everybody knows what Social Security is, and it came from this time. So many of these things, some of them don't make sense to have lasted up till now, because some of them was just a quick fix, sort of band-aid before we got into World War II. But some of them, like Social Security, have, of course, they've evolved, but they're still here today, which is just, yeah, that's proving the point that history informs our present.
Sure.
All right. So let's look at the timeline a little bit more. 1933, the first 100 days. March 4th, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, inaugurated as the 32nd President of the United States. March 9th, just a few days after he was inaugurated, he started the Emergency Banking Relief Act. This shows how serious FDR was about this, that this was his priority. Because from inauguration to just a couple days later, action already starting to get taken. The EBRA reopened solvent banks after the bank holiday, and it restored public confidence in the banking system. This was an example of reform, right? It's changing the system so that it doesn't happen again. Which I guess I could have kind of made that a little quiz. If you want to just not look at the slides and just imagine which one is relief, reform, or recovery, you can, but I didn't plan for that. Anyway, March 31st, 1933, the Civilian Conservation Corps. It employs young men in conservation, reforestation, and park development projects. And again, relief. Because what was relief all about? Get people surviving, get people working. May 12th, 1933, the Federal Emergency Relief Act. This provided direct cash grants to states for unemployment relief programs. Again, relief. Let's just get people out of the hole they're in. Are we doing good so far? Any questions about these acts? Or
there is a small quiz for the New Deal that comes right after this.
yes. All right. May 12th, Federal Emergency Relief Act. This said that all on already. Also in May 12th, the Agricultural Adjustment Act pays farmers to reduce their crop production to raise agricultural prices. This is a form of recovery. May 18th, the TVA, I talked about it a little bit earlier, builds dams, generates electricity, improves navigation in the Tennessee Valley. Again, recovery. June 16th, 1933, National Industrial Recovery Act creates National Recovery Administration, the NRA, to set industry codes for wages, hours, and prices. Another example of reform, or recovery, sorry. Then in June 16th, we got the Glass-Steagall Banking Act. This was the idea of separating commercial and investment banking. It established the FDIC to ensure deposits. So before I go on with the timeline, we can see already just in 1 year, a couple of months, how many different acts and projects and programs were being implemented with this. I don't know what else to say about it. It shows how serious people were taking it and how much action was being taken. Any other thoughts? So now we move on to 1934. June 6th, the Securities Exchange Act. This created the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, to regulate the stock market, right? Example of reform. And then we got 1935. Now this was the second New Deal. So the idea was in the first New Deal, this was FDR's plan just to jumpstart everything, just to get everything underway. And now as part of the second New Deal, okay, now we're starting to get a little bit of a handle on the Great Depression. Let's put on some more reforms based on the ones we've already seen. Starting with April 8th, the Emergency Relief Appropriation Act. This funds the Works Progress Administration, the WPA, which becomes the largest public works employer in U.S. history. I don't remember what I said earlier. What was it, like 600,000 jobs? So this was an example of both relief and recovery. July 5th, the National Labor Relations Act, also known as the Wagner Act. This protected workers' rights to unionize and engage in collective bargaining. Example of reform. And I got two more, guys, just stick with me. August 14th, 1935, the Social Security Act. This created pensions for the elderly, unemployment insurance, and aid for the disabled and dependent children, an example of reform. And we got June 25th, 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act. This established a minimum wage, maximum working hours, and it ended child labor in certain industries, an example of reform. Now, what I shared with you is just a couple of examples of several of the different acts and programs that were created during the Great Depression, during the New Deal. And do we all get a good idea of relief, recovery, reform, the difference of that, and how each of these different acts played a part in that? Cool. So let's take a little quiz. All right. What were, here, you already saw the answer. What were the primary goals of the New Deal, often referred to as the 3 R's? A, rebuild, renew, recycle. B, relief, reform, recovery. C, reinvest, rebalance, reorganize. Or D, rescue, rebuild, reform.
B.
Exactly, B. 3 R's stood for relief, immediate, which was immediate aid. Yeah, somebody raised a hand. What's up?
I answer, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Relief, immediate aid, recovery, economic growth, and reform, systemic changes to prevent future collapse. All right. Which New Deal program aimed to put young men to work planting trees and improving national parks? Was it the WPA, the Works Progress Administration? Was it the Social Security Administration, the Civilian Conservation Corps, or the Tennessee Valley Authority? I've seen a couple answers, got some C's. Yeah, see a lot for C, which is the correct answer. CCC was focused on environmental projects and employed over 3 million young men. All right. Now we're talking about the Tennessee Valley Authority. What was its key purpose? Was it to regulate the stock market, to monitor food distribution, to electrify rural areas and control flooding, or D, to expand Social Security? I see some answers for C, and you would be correct. The TVA brought electricity and modernization to 7 different states, improving economic development in the region. Awesome. All right, got another one. Is that the last one for now? Not sure. Which act separated commercial banking from investment banking? A, the Glass-Steagall Act, B, the Wagner Act, C, the McCarran Act, or D, the Taft-Hartley Act? Yeah. A, the Glass-Steagall Act aimed to prevent risky speculation and bank failures by creating a regulatory wall between banking functions. All right, we got another one. Why is the New Deal relevant to U.S. diplomats today? A, it introduced the first international treaty. B, it laid the groundwork for future authoritarian regimes. C, it served as proof that democracies can recover from crisis. Or D, it ended World War II. Yeah, got a lot of quick answers, got a lot of C. Exactly. New Deal proved that large-scale recovery and reform could happen within a democratic framework. This became a model for later U.S. foreign aid strategies. That was great, guys. That's awesome. And so I think when I try to study all this, I get intimidated because I'm not going to always remember whichever act this was. I mean, I said it 2 minutes ago. I already forgot what the Wagner Act was. But the main idea is we're getting a sense of it so that even if we just have to remind ourselves, it's not studying as if it's the first time we're learning these things. It's just like, wait a minute, what was the New Deal about? Okay, yeah, it was about this general idea of showing that democratic frameworks can work to restore things, especially during the Great Depression. And the New Deal did that from FDR because he had a lot of ideas of just how he can improve the economy, fix the system. You guys get what I'm saying? It's less memorization and more just having a general idea of what the point of it was, right? Cool. So now we have one more question. During a diplomatic mission, you're asked how the U.S. historically demonstrated that democracy could effectively address economic crises. Which historical argument best supports your response? Now, the previous ones were more FSOT style questions. This one is a little bit more something you might get in the FSOA or something you might, a little bit more of an intense thinking, sort of critical thinking question. So with that being said, is which historical argument best supports your response? A, the U.S. withdrew from global institutions during the Great Depression, emphasizing isolation as a strength of democracy. B, the U.S. preserved its democratic structure while implementing massive federal programs through the New Deal, later using this model to shape international recovery programs like the Marshall Plan. C. The U.S. abandoned capitalist principles in favor of nationalized industries, proving that central planning was more democratic. Or D. The U.S. passed constitutional amendments during the Great Depression to restrict executive power, reinforcing checks and balances as the only solution. Seeing answers for B. Yeah, you guys are on it. I don't know what else to say. Correct answer is B. This question requires connecting domestic policy with international influence. The New Deal was not just a domestic recovery effort, it proved democracy's capacity to respond to crisis. This example was later used to diplomatically to justify and model international recovery efforts, such as the Marshall Plan, and it showed that effective governance didn't require authoritarian control. You guys did great. All the emojis. Thank you, Travis. And everyone else. And so I think this is also a good example of the fact that we didn't talk about the Marshall Plan. So it's like, whoa, hey, I don't know that. I don't know the answer. No, you know the general idea of the New Deal. You know how it connects to us today. And so you got the right answer. Beautiful. Now then, that's about all I have to say about the New Deal. It's tough because, like I said, you could spend classes on the New Deal. I could go in depth on each act, on what it did, on how effective it was, on how, in the general scheme of things, was the New Deal even effective for helping the Great Depression? How did it transfer us into World War II? You can go on and on and on again. But I feel like today we kind of covered the basics of the New Deal while at the same time giving us that fundamental understanding of it. Does anybody else have any other questions or thoughts, or maybe there's something you already know about the New Deal that I didn't mention?
Could you show slide 15?
Slide 15. This one?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I 100% agree with what Nathan just said, is that there's a lot of specifics there. But this is more so just to get you pointed in the right direction to kickstart your studies. But the promise of the New Deal, I feel like if you can remember the 3 R's in these bullet points, you will be in a good place.
Yeah, exactly. It's this idea that if you can write out or even just say like a sentence or two about what the New Deal is, what the 3 R's were, and even if you don't remember exactly which words the 3 R's were, at least understanding their purpose. So less so the content, more so the whole point. Make sense? With that being said, that concludes our talk about the New Deal. So we're going to move forward to talking about something called the Fair Deal, which also occurred during the Civil Rights era. So before I get into more slides for that, let me give you some context. All right. We've seen how the New Deal of the 1930s reshaped the US economy and laid the groundwork for decades of growth. And it also proved that democracy could adapt and respond to crisis at a time when authoritarian regimes were rising abroad. But history doesn't pause. Now we're in the mid-1940s. What happened during the 1940s?
The Second World War.
Exactly, the Second World War. United States had fought and won World War II. The global balance of power shifted. America is now a superpower, also known as a hegemony, which that's just a fancy word for the main country that everybody sort of looks to. And America was facing down the Soviet Union, which was in a new ideological contest. Any ideas what this contest was between America and the Soviet Union? .
The Cold War.
Exactly, man. You're on it. You're on top of it. It's the Cold War. At home, millions of soldiers are returning, but inflation was also rising. Housing was scarce, and calls for equality were growing louder. And so that brings us into our next chapter. Sorry, I forget where we were.
Slide 31.
31. Thank you, Travis. The Fair Deal and Civil Rights Era. If the New Deal was about survival and rebuilding during the Depression, hear me here. The Fair Deal was about expanding prosperity and fairness in a post-war democracy. So I'll say that again. New Deal, it's about survival. It's about rebuilding. The Great Depression, you just got to survive, rebuild. Fair Deal, hey, we're in post-war now, and we're in a post-war democracy. So how are we going to expand? How are we going to prosper? How are we going to promote fairness and equality? That's what the Fair Deal was about. Alongside it, the Civil Rights Movement forced America to confront one of its deepest contradictions. How could a nation leading the free world tolerate segregation and racial inequality at home? So, in this period, the big themes are, there's three of them. Economic fairness. Truman's Fair Deal attempts to extend the New Deal principles into healthcare, housing, education. Economic fairness. The second one is civil rights breakthroughs. From Truman's desegregation of the military in 1948 to the Supreme Court's Brown v. Board of Education decision in 1954 to landmark laws like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, all of these are about civil rights breakthroughs. So we got economic fairness, civil rights breakthroughs, and the third one is global implications. Because during the Cold War, the US domestic policies weren't just for Americans. I'll say that again. Our domestic policies weren't just for Americans. The world is watching. The world was watching. And civil rights progress, or the lack thereof, directly shaped US credibility abroad. Following along? Cool. With that in mind, let's dive into the timeline of the Fair Deal and the Civil Rights Era. And let's see how these policies and movements carried forward the legacy of the New Deal while also pushing the US into a new era of reform. April 12, 1945, Truman becomes president. On April 12th, Franklin Roosevelt dies suddenly, and Vice President Harry Truman takes over. The war in Europe is still raging, but the US is already preparing for peacetime. Truman now faces the challenge of bringing millions of veterans back into civilian life and making sure prosperity is shared. He calls for what he names the Fair Deal. Think of it as the New Deal's younger sibling. Less about emergency survival, more about long-term fairness, as I've said. (1948) Desegregation of the military. Here's a major turning point. On July 26, 1948, Truman issues Executive Order 9981, desegregating the armed forces and federal workforce. In this time, this was bold. It happened years before the civil rights movement even gained national momentum. It also marked the first time since the Reconstruction era, which, if you guys don't remember the Reconstruction, this was post-Civil War in the 1800s, that the federal government directly challenged racial segregation. Here's a quick quiz, just in case anybody knows it. I haven't gone over it, but if you know it, true or false? Truman's desegregation order was passed by Congress.
Well, I would think false because you say executive order. And as we see with Trump, executive orders are often issued long before Congress gets involved and can be seen as a way of circumventing it.
Exactly. You're completely correct. It was an executive order, so he didn't need to go to Congress. And bringing in Trump is such a relevant thing that we can talk about, because we're seeing how history, I won't say history repeats itself. Yes, history repeats itself, but more so, history informs us, and history has an odd way of, I don't know, just having a deja vu sort of effect. I can imagine back in 1948, people saying, Truman, he's making all these executive orders and he hasn't even asked Congress. You know what I mean? I think it's a bit of a tangent, but it's something to think about, that we see history as sort of this separate from us. They did what they did, but we're doing what we're doing, and these are our problems now, not whatever they were up to. The thing is, humans have been humans across time. And so humans are still going to think like them. Humans are still going to have the same emotions, the same reactions, the same thought processes as before. So it's important not to discount history, especially as we're talking about becoming diplomats, to understand that history, because often it mirrors our own, right? Awesome. 1949, the Housing Act of 1949. Congress does give Truman one fair deal win, which, let me back up. Talking about how it was an executive order, that does mean that there was some pushback. Congress and Truman didn't always get along with the whole goal or even the whole premise of the fair deal. But in the Housing Act of 1949, Congress does sort of give in and say, all right, let's do this. Which, what does it do? It funds hundreds of thousands of public housing units and begins federal support for urban renewal. Now, while it aimed to improve housing access, in practice, some urban renewal projects actually displaced the poor and minority communities. So it's a reminder that reform policies can have both benefits and unintended consequences. Does that make sense? Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys know this one, that you could probably teach on this as well. May 17th, 1954, Brown v. Board of Education. Now, spotlight is shifting from to the Supreme Court. If we're talking about, the president and Truman and, Congress, now it's at the Supreme Court level because of Brown v. Board of Education, which strike down racial segregation in public schools. It declared that separate but equal is inherently unequal. It's a watershed moment because it overturns Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896, and it energizes the civil rights activists nationwide, right? Does anyone know which future Chief Justice persuaded the court to make this ruling unanimous?
You're talking about Thurgood Marshall?
He was around during that same time, but it was Justice Earl Warren.
Oh, right. Because Marshall was never Chief Justice. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's why I'm confused.
Give me just a moment. My battery's running a bit low on one of my screens. So let me just pull something up on another, just in case this one dies.
This commercial break is brought to you by the Future Diplomats. If you have not had a chance to email me, I see Maddie laughing at me, email me your name so you can get on the distribution list, please do. And I will make sure you are up on the latest and greatest. Also, random fact, where did President Trump get the slogan, "Make America Great Again"? Speaking of history, it was from Ronald Reagan during his 1980 presidential run. The more you know.
I actually didn't know that, which is amazing because we're going to cover Reaganomics. Probably
Yes,
not
we
today. We will.
Just funny enough, I recently watched this, Netflix has this new documentary. It's like the epidemic of crack or something in the United States. But of course, it talks a lot about, what the Reagan presidency did for the war on drugs in this country. And if I had not watched that documentary last week, I would not know the answer to that question, because I saw that slogan in Reagan's campaign and I thought, oh, that's so funny. I've seen that before. So, watch your TV and learn your.
I would definitely go check that out. Thank you for the recommendation.
Yeah.
Netflix has a lot of great documentaries, including the Cold War.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. So let's go on to, can you guys still see me all right? Hear me all right? We're good? Cool. 1955, the Montgomery bus boycott. Only a year later from Brown v. Board of Education, which, let's just pause right there. Just a year later, which is showing just how the stuff kind of builds up in a kind of a quick way. Only a year later, in 1955, Rosa Parks refuses to give up her seat on a Montgomery bus. The result? A year-long bus boycott that ends in victory, desegregation of buses, and catapults MLK Jr. into the national spotlight. This shows how grassroots activism could translate into real systemic change. As I read that, grassroots activism, something else I'm reminded of is just this idea of how when we're learning, when we're studying history, we hear these terms like grassroots activism. And even in today, we say them and we talk about them in a way that's very educational, which obviously, yeah, educational, but also let's think about the context of how real it was for people back then. And so how real the stuff we're going through in America today is real for us. Decades from now, people will be referring to our time period as, oh yeah, that's a time period when this happened and that happened. So I think let's just, just a tangent, some food for thought to just think about how let's not separate the real human element from it. You know what I mean? (1960), the Greensboro sit-ins. College students in Greensboro, North Carolina, launch sit-ins at a segregated Woolworth's lunch counter. Their courage sparks copycat protests across the South, proving that young people were a driving force during the civil rights movement. Pop quiz. What does the SNCC stand for? I didn't say it earlier. It's just if you already know it.
Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
Matthew. Okay. Yeah. Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. This was born out of this student movement. How are we doing on time? Oh, it's just about 6. All right. With that being said, let me go ahead and finish this slide, and then we'll cut it off there until next time. August 28th, 1963. The March on Washington. 250,000 people gather at the Lincoln Memorial for the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. It's here that MLK Jr. delivers his famous which speech?
I have a dream.
I have a dream. That's right. And the march isn't just symbolic, it directly pressures Congress to pass sweeping civil rights legislation the following year. Which, I'll say that again, it directly pressured Congress, which again comes back to what we were talking about earlier of the context of we've got different players. We've got the president, we've got Congress, we've got the Supreme Court, we've got young people doing sit-ins, our common people who are doing things. You guys get what I'm saying? And then finally, let's go with July 2nd, 1964. The Civil Rights Act of 1964. This is the legislative crown jewel. It bans segregation in public places and prohibits discrimination in employment based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. This law transforms American society and gives the federal government real enforcement power against discrimination. Which president, little quiz, which president signed the Civil Rights Act into law?
Lyndon B. Johnson.
Exactly. It was Lyndon B. Johnson right after Kennedy's assassination. Good job. You guys are smart. Look at this.
Yeah, let's do something else. I learned that in that documentary on crack last week.
Oh, nice.
Was Lyndon the vice president
Yes.
initially? Okay.
And he took office after that. All right.
Okay.
Let me see if do I have like a conclusion slide around here?
No, because we're still kind of in motion. But
Right.
if you'll go to slide 34, we have time for one quiz, and then we'll jump to somewhat of an end.
Okay. Well, let's give this a shot. What was the primary goal of President Truman's Executive Order 9981 in 1948? A, ban segregation in public schools. B, end housing discrimination. C, desegregate the military and federal workforce. Or D, establish voting protections for Black Americans. A couple answers coming through. You guys are smart. Look at us. C, Executive Order 9981 was a landmark move to end segregation in the armed forces and federal employment, laying the groundwork for broader civil rights reforms. Which, again, this was one of the first things. It was an executive order, not passed by Congress. And then shortly after that, it would just continue to snowball. Good job, guys.
Awesome. Congratulations. Next week, we will continue with Nathan leading this study, this session, and we will jump directly into part 2. Going to go into the Great Society, Reaganomics, and the Clinton era. So slide 49. So that's kind of the conclusion slide, if you will. Thank you so much. And I'll let Nate take us out.
Yes. So yeah, thank you guys. I guess.